goals, give more returns. Get more security and more interest on your fixed deposits from Sri Lanka's largest finance company, LOLC Finance.
A people resplendent with sincerity still walk amongst us. Be honest. The beauty of a nation lies in the integrity of its people. Refresh Sri Lanka for a civic-minded society. In association with AICPA and CIMA, CA, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka, and 99X. LMD, the voice of business.
Hello and welcome to LMDtv. Today on the forum, we're looking at peaceful protests versus violent demonstrations from a legal perspective. And with me, I have the President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, Mr. Kaushalya Nawaratne. It's very nice to have you on the show, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you so much.
To start off our conversation, can you define what a peaceful protest is, especially focusing on the word peaceful?
Yes, and prior to that, that is one of the freedoms that the citizens are entitled to engage in. That is a peaceful protest, that the freedom of expression. So those are some of the salient freedoms that have been recognized by the Constitution itself. So when you say the freedom, what do you mean by the freedom? Freedom means that the absence of any control by any arm of the government, the state. And we have seen, and we have on daily basis, we have seen how the protests are being interfered with, the controlled by the arms of the government, perhaps the police, perhaps the armed forces, perhaps the imposition of certain restrictions. We have seen the government is imposing or rather publishing gazette notification restricting certain entitlements of the citizens. So the peaceful, when you say the freedom, so the freedom is something where without any interference of the control or any other mode of restrictions imposed by the state, the citizen, something which the citizens are entitled to enjoy. So the peaceful protest is also another, the expression of dissent to the government or to that matter anything by a citizen well within the purview of law. So that peacefully you are well entitled to maintain the exercise your rights, entitlements, and which have been recognized by the law. Of course, when you say the freedom, and you are not supposed to break the law.
And peaceful protests seem to be a very rare thing. Are there any examples that you can share locally or globally?
Yes, peaceful protest is one of the main arms or the slogan that have been used by the citizens all over the world, not only in the recent part, even for centuries to centuries ago. But for instance, if you look at our neighboring country, India, and we all know how Mahatma Gandhi launched a very peaceful protest which led for the India to gain independence from the United British. So likewise, like if you say that the protests they start with the very peacefully, but with the passage of time it become very violent. But if you look at countries like Iraq, Iran, and how what it's happened. And in the Pakistan, the lawyers launched a protest, a peaceful protest against certain government regulation, rules and regulations, which led subsequently to certain other areas where they became very violent because with the passage of time, citizens got involved so that they lost the control over the whole thing and it became very violent. So one of the most iconic, one of the important thing that is being recognized by globally, all the people in the globe, that is the peaceful protest launched by Mahatma Gandhi in India. Of course, that is one of the most important thing which led for them to gain independence.
One of the best examples.
That is one of the best examples which I can think of.
You spoke about many protests starting peacefully and then becoming violent. What is that fine line that people cross, and what are the trigger points?
I think the answer is there in your question itself. There is a very fine line between these two, the peaceful protest plus the violent protest. Why? The reasons. What happens is when the demonstration starts, I mean, classic example in Sri Lanka, like what happened 1 year ago, and the people protested like individually, sometimes due to certain reasons, which of course it's in the public domain, and they started peacefully, sometimes with their children. They used to come out of the gates, they held placards, they used to wear some black bands. Likewise, they just protested, they displayed their dissent to the governors, the rulers. Then with the passage of time, the government also took certain steps to control. That's what I said, peaceful protest, entitlements, now it's transforming into a violent protest. Then when the moment to try to control and impose certain restrictions, then of course the reaction is automatically to become very violent. That is exactly the classic example in Sri Lanka, what happened like exactly 1 year ago.
And when it comes to violent demonstrations, how should law enforcement really take action against these citizens, because they are, like you said, showing their dissent?
Yeah, that is the most important thing. The Constitution recognizes the rights and entitlements of the citizens, and you know that there are fundamental rights, and the fundamental rights are recognized by the Constitution, by the basic laws of the country, but subject to certain restrictions. The moment you become violent and you break the law, and someone tries to take the law into their hands, which we say commonly, and that is not something which will be encouraged by the law. And then certainly the law enforcement authorities, including the police, perhaps the armed forces, they have to intervene and maintain the law and order and the rule of law in the country. Otherwise, lawlessness is something which is not encouraged by a democratic society where the rule of law is respected and protected.
And when it comes to lawlessness, again, I think someone would think something is lawful and something is not. How should that line?
Yeah, certainly that is exactly what happened. Like if you look at the classic example, what happened in Sri Lanka, and some part of some segment in the society, they took up the position. Some protests were very violent, and it should be curtailed and restricted. But on the other hand, the people who were supporting these protests, they took up the position, no, that is the right of the people. Of course, you have seen sometime when the protesters are taken into custody and produced before court, and most of the time they have been indulged on bail and is subject to certain exceptions where some were held under PTA. And then of course the provisions of law is slightly different. So in that circumstances, of course, we have to make certain application with the process of law, and the process have to be followed. If not, most of the time the court, or rather especially the magistrate schools, they have taken up the position, and they have released, or rather enlarged, most of the protesters on bail. So that shows some may give the interpretation it is violent and should be curtailed and it should be scuttled, but some say no, that is the right of the people. But of course, one fact we have to remember, people are entitled to display their dissent, and that must be respected. That is the fundamental basic right of the citizen of any country, and which is of course protected in terms of the provisions and the articles of our own constitution.
You were talking about how different groups of protesters protested differently. Looking at the fact that many of these protesters are actually blaming the government and to some extent public officers around all aspects, when there is a lot of blame game happening, how should have the protest been handled?
Yeah, so the protester, of course, as I said, the fundamental basic, you cannot breach the law, you can't observe the law in breach. So it has to be protected, maintained. That's why we say that the law and order must be maintained in the country. So that is why if the lawlessness is gonna take charge of the country, there are certain provisions in law, like especially ICCPR, where you can impose the emergency regulations, so that the the executive or the parliament, they can take certain steps, even to call the army, the triforces, to come and protect the citizens. And so there are various certain exceptions. Subject to those exceptions and exemptions, certainly those laws will be imposed. So that is why I said the groups, the people who are involved or who are supportive of the protest, they may give a different interpretation. The who are against it may give a different interpretation and approach, but it is up to the court finally to a determination whether the pro people have done the right thing or against, and that is something which is in the hands of courts.
I'm going to repeat something you said. You said the law is there to protect everyone, but no one should take the law into their own hands. Going ahead in the future, let's say even this particular year, when so many changes and so many challenges are going to be coming our way, how is this statement going to stand, and what measures should be taken to make sure that no one takes the law into their hands?
Certainly. Then Bar Association is one institution which has always stood for the rights of the people, and that is our fundamental duty. And the lawyers are an integral part of our society, and we are, I say normally, we are the guardians of the rule of law. And this is the Bar Association is the prime institution, the main institution of the lawyers. When you say the lawyers, and that includes the members of the official bar, the Attorney General's Department, and the members of the judiciary, including the Chief Justice. So the Bar Association, they are members of the Bar Association. So it is the Bar Association which is the main professional body which will take each and every single step to protect the citizens of the country and to for the advancement of the rule of law.
And looking at the outer stakeholders of law enforcement, how should they be trained, or how should they be guided to make sure that people's voices are heard, but of course minus the violence?
Yeah, that is something which is being advocated for a long period of time. For instance, we went through a 30-year war, and the various allegations have been made, saying that there's a breach of the fundamental rights of the people, and some people have been harassed, and so many things are being alleged. But of course, it is my opinion that it is the time for all the stakeholders, including the Bar Association, to take measures to educate not only the law enforcement authorities and with regard to the rights and obligations of the citizens as well. So that I think with that, if you educate the citizens correctly, and then of course I feel the rule of law can be maintained. Lack of knowledge of the subject is dangerous.
Definitely. And sir, Sri Lanka is at a very crucial point right now, and the journey ahead to come out of the crisis we are in is not going to be easy, as we saw with the recent tax hikes. So in your view, do you see peaceful protests and violent demonstrations happening in the coming months, and if so, what are your recommendations?
Both. I expect both. The people are finding it a little difficult. We as citizens of the country, we always see, and we got to be a little practical, and the people are finding extremely difficult in view of the recession in the country, and the people find it difficult to find their day-to-day means, so that they will most likely come and show their dissent, and that dissent must be respected and it must be heard. Their voice could be heard, and it shall be heard. And if because of these the issues, if the authorities take I would say unlawful measures to curtail the demonstrations or to scuttle their voices or to suppress their dissent, is something which should not be tolerated. It is my personal opinion.
And what are your recommendations to the people, to civilians who will protest?
Yeah, my recommendation would be like you have to respect the law, and you are not supposed to take the law into your hand. So even we as professionals, and not only as a sort of an organization, we as individually, if a lawyer has to defend, if you are to be defended before a court of law, you have to basically act well within the purview or the realm of the law. If not, you violate the law, you will have to be punished. So therefore, whatever the dissent or the demonstrations, what you do, what you intend in doing, that will have to be done well within the purview of the law.
I'm going to ask you a question that's very close to LMD. So recently we launched a campaign called Refresh Sri Lanka, where we're trying to encourage the creation of a civic-minded society. Now, civic-mindedness we saw last year. Everyone came together as a family to voice their dissent. How can we ensure that there is civic-mindedness in terms of the other side of the story, the government and the public entities? What are your focus areas to ensure?
Yeah, that is exactly what I mentioned a little earlier, because the lack of knowledge of the rights of the citizen is something which has led to many debacles in the past and even at present, perhaps in future as well. So the education, and you have to always educate the general public, the citizens, with regard to their civic-minded rights, so that I would say we can have a very peaceful society.
And we're almost at the end of our conversation, but before we wind up, what are your final thoughts that you would like to share with our audience?
So certainly, like we as an organization, the Bar Association, we will always defend and uphold the rights of the citizens without any qualifications whatsoever. So that I would urge all the stakeholders, including the government and the governors, to respect the rights of the citizens.
Exactly. Thank you so much. We've been talking to the President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, Mr. Kaushalya Nawaratne. It's very nice to have you on the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
And to our viewers, stay tuned for a new episode of BizWire coming up.
Display your brand message on digital screens at prime locations. The largest digital advertising network in Sri Lanka. Emerging media.
You're mobile, and so are we.
Gets me going.
Grab the Lite 87 app at the Apple App Store or Google Play now.
87.8 and 87.6 island-wide. Lite 87.
Hello and welcome to another episode of BizWire. Today we're zooming in on the event space of Sri Lanka, and with me I have the newly appointed Managing Director of Event Productions, Raj Vijayaratne. Very nice to have you on the show, Raj.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start off our discussion with an overview of the event space right now. What's new? What's hot?
I would say in Sri Lanka currently, our event industry is in a little bit of a recovery mode. Considering everything that has gone on globally the past few years, from COVID to here, the economic crisis that we've had, a lot of what we're seeing now is everyone playing catch up after the tough few years. You have a lot of companies, local companies that are exploring newer event opportunities in virtual spaces, in augmented reality. These are things that we need to bring into our industry, I would say, much faster. It's not happening as fast as we would, but that's something that we would like to bring in, and I would say where we are now is kind of setting the pace for where we want to go in the next couple of years.
You spoke of digital events. What are the other kind of trends that you're seeing globally, which, like you said, we should adopt faster?
So like I mentioned, globally there's so much happening now. If you look at it from the physical event spaces where people are bringing in augmented reality, new virtual experiences to their events, that's happening a lot in the region around us as well as globally. I would say we have adopted to it to a certain extent. We ourselves spent majority of COVID producing virtual events, and sometimes a little bit more than your straightforward Zoom webinar kind of things. So that is something that I wouldn't say that we'd have to let go of it now since things are better, but it's something that we'd have to keep building on, because you really never know when we're going to have to go back to those methods again.
And when you talk of clients and how they really adapt to these situations, what's happening over there in that section?
Well, I would say, speaking specifically on our local clientele, they do want to try new things. They are influenced a lot by what they see globally. They're seeing lots of these cool activities and tech-based solutions that are happening in events all around the world. Sadly, what we are going through now doesn't allow clients to, I would say, have budgets for those kind of things. And that being said, from our point of view, from an event manager's point of view, and the costing side of things, costs are constantly going up, whereas clients' budgets are not going up. So I wouldn't say it has always been like this, but considering where we are now, that is a challenge that we face.
And apart from cost implications, what are the other demands that clients have, and how are you guys and the industry really fulfilling them?
So other than that, I would say a lot of what clients look at is the experience of their guests at their events. So it really it comes down to, you know, not just on what's happening on stage. It's the experience from the moment that you are invited to an event to the moment that you leave an event, and what the client takes away with them. So what we try to do is see how we can add value to the straightforward events that we do. And these demands increase every year. Clients push us every year because most of the events that we do are annual events. Some we've done for 15, 20 years every year. So that is a challenge for us as well, to see how we can kind of raise the bar every year.
True. I'm coming back to the industry and the past 3 years that we've had. Pandemic, crisis, you name it, we had it. But how do you think the industry really stood up and, you know, like took on these challenges, including like the little tactics as well as the strategic initiatives?
Okay, so I would say the event industry was hit pretty bad with, you know, from Corona up to the crisis now. There were lots of changes that happened in the industry. Lots of players, big and small, had to kind of shift the way they worked, the methods at which, you know, they put events together. Our company ourselves, we had a lot of restructuring going on. Like I mentioned before, online events was something that carried a lot of us those few years. There were the progressive companies that, you know, wanted to take on that challenge, and because of that, they're at a better footing now since things are slightly better. Like for us, for example, we've managed to sustain ourselves the last few years with the virtual side of things and the smaller physical events. So we're now at a better footing to kind of take it forward and try and bring things back to where they were prior to all the madness.
Talking of event productions, I think the company is celebrating 30 years?
Yeah, 30 years.
So can you take us through those 30 years, like very quickly, the milestones and what's happening right now?
Okay, so I've been around, or I've been involved in the business for about 12 years now. I know when my dad started the business 30 years ago, it was definitely no easy ball game. Considering, you know, from technology to communication to just logistics, hearing stories about how it happened back then is pretty scary. So I think we're quite blessed to be where we are at now. In terms of milestones, I would say just being around an event company that's been around for 30 years, and, you know, we haven't, I wouldn't say we haven't had any major issues over the 30 years. We've managed to work throughout the war, throughout the pandemic, throughout this crisis. So the fact that we have stood for this long and we have clients that have stood by us for this long is a great strength, I would say.
That's something very special, but that's just me saying it. According to you, what's the most special thing about event productions?
Okay, so I would say the special thing is how we look at events and how we approach events. For our business and for our company, a lot of what we look at is the passion that we have for having a successful event. We are not purely motivated by profit. For me personally, nothing beats the feeling of, you know, finishing a big event that you've been spending months on working, and you see the client smile after that, and you know things went okay. So I think what makes us special is our commitment to delivering that kind of a service to a client, you know, aside from the numbers and the profit. And the other thing would be, I would say, our transparency with clients, competition, and how we deal with business in general. I know for a fact a lot of clients have stuck with us because they know throughout the years their events and their budgets have been used for their events and their budgets. You know, be it a small budget or a big budget, we try to make sure that the client understands that 100% of what they give us goes towards value addition of the event.
Lovely. So Raish, you spoke of client demands. Can you take us through the process of, how you deal with clients from the time they contact you first until that smile on their face?
Okay. So a lot of what we get from clients, new clients at least, is, hi, we'd like to do an event. Can we get a quotation, please? Which we try to avoid, and we try to explain to the client what the process is to plan an event. Yes, a budget is a must, but you need to look at your objectives of the event at first. I would say a strong point with us is planning, because no event can be done without 200% planning. So we spend a lot of time initially, before getting to costings and things, kind of explaining to the clients what to expect, kind of get what their expectations are as well, and to point out the things that could go wrong and how we could mitigate these issues. And what's very important is deadlines, because you have clients who would brief you 4 months before an event. That gives you good time to come up with planning, all of that. Whereas you've had clients who would give you 2 weeks notice. So it's very important as to how I would manage my time and how I would expect the client to manage their time as well, because we don't fancy doing rush jobs for events, because the more rushed you do things, the more the things can go wrong. So I would say from start to finish, planning is a big part of it. As long as you've got your plans right, the event day doesn't have to be stressful. What we tell our clients is, listen, if you hand over an event to us, you don't need to stress on the day of the event. We want you to be a guest at the event. So that's at least what we strive for.
And asking a difficult question, how do you deal with difficult clients?
Okay, so dealing with difficult clients, I would say one is managing the expectations from the get-go. Because you need to understand that, yes, these clients have something in their head that they want to see on their event day, but they don't know the workings of it and the background, and you can't blame them because that is not their space. So I would say it's our responsibility from the get-go to manage their expectations, and patience is a lot of it, because no matter how much you try to manage a client's expectations, you're going to have the odd chance where they are not seeing eye to eye with you, which is normal, but it's a continuous process, from the planning to the event day, just making sure that they are comfortable. Because there have been instances where you start off and a client is extremely difficult, but towards the latter part, they're really calm and okay with you. So I think a lot of it has to do with how you would manage them and keep them calm and, that relationship and let them know that you know what you are doing and have that confidence.
Raj, you spoke of 2023 being an interesting and exciting year. Before we let you go, can you just take us through how you manage the portfolio between business events, corporate events and entertainment events?
I would say they both have very different approaches. Corporate events are majority of the work that we do. When it comes to corporate events, yes, planning is important in both aspects of corporate and entertainment, but I would say corporate is when you have a lot more responsibility in terms of your client's vision, because your client is coming out there with a brand or product that they are bringing out for the first time to their audience. So the stress is a little bit more on our end there, because it's up to us to make sure that we depict their story in the right way. Whereas entertainment-based events, yes, there is a story, but you have a little bit of leeway in terms of how you can present things. So in a nutshell, I would say corporate requires a lot more attention to detail, a lot more backup planning on every aspect of an event. Entertainment, yes, there are backups. We do go that extra mile as well. But I would say the difference between the two would be the level of stress that you would have between corporate and entertainment-based events.
Got it. And talking about you, 12 years, can you remember your first event? How did you get into this?
Yeah, I remember my first event and being completely, I wouldn't say lost, but it was so new to me because I never wanted to get into the event space. It was never a thought until I was working here. I was working at a local music label for about a year. And I grew up seeing my dad, you know, run in and out of events, in and out of the house, from house to events, back and forth. And I kind of offered to help him about 12 years ago. And once I got involved, I did see that this was a perfect fit for me. It definitely beat the mundane 9 to 5 jobs. This is like a 9 to 9 or 9 a.m. to 9 a.m. the next day kind of job, but it has its moments, and I'm glad I stuck to it.
I'm sure your dad has a big influence on you, but if you talk about things that inspire you and influence you, what would you list?
Funnily, I would say that he is my biggest influence, simply because everything that I have learned in terms of the industry, I have learned from him, and I still do 12 years later. I'm lucky to have someone who has been in the industry for 30 years and continues to kind of point me in the right direction. Basically from running the business to how we treat our clients to how we treat our staff. You know, everything from A to Z has been, I've been shown the ropes, and I'm really grateful for that. And in addition to what he has taught me, I do like to kind of study what's happening around us in the region. India, for example, that has a lot going on in the event space. We try to be influenced with what they have and what they try to achieve for their clients. We're a bit behind in terms of, I would say, the technology and what is available in the country, but we're aspiring to be there for sure.
And talking about you, what is your, mantra for continuous learning?
Okay, so my mantra in general, I would say, in the event space is keeping calm. With that, the learning, all of that comes along, but having handled literally thousands of events, from start to finish, live events where mistakes cannot be made, things cannot go wrong, the lesson that I've really learned is to be calm in situations that are good and when things go wrong as well, because that sets the tone for the rest of the event and your clients as well. So I would say keeping calm is number one, and once that is done, you have time to learn, you have time to kind of look into the other areas, look at how other people do work and other markets.
Lovely. So keep calm and keep doing it.
Definitely.
So before we wind off our discussion, what is 2023 looking like for event productions? 2023
is looking good, I would say, considering the last few years. We had a lull of about 3 years where lots of our bigger clients who have their annual events toned them down a lot. We had 1,000-pack events that were cut down to 100-pack events. But this year, people are actually planning to go full force like they did prior to the pandemic. So I would say for event productions, we have an exciting year coming ahead. Challenges aren't done. We're still going to have lots more, but I'm quite confident, considering the last few years and everything we went through, that we're pretty much ready to tackle anything that comes our way and take it one step at a time.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We've been talking to the Managing Director of Event Productions, Ruwandi Perera. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, take care.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for watching and stay safe.